let's rock and roll. Okay, so basically, when you're talking about nutrition, you're talking about energy, right? At the end of the day, that is what the topic is all about, is the balance of energy. And it's a huge topic. There's a lot of debate. There's a lot of misinformation. There's plenty of controversy in the world of diet, but energy is what it comes down to. Because at the end of the day, it's the balance of energy, either in or out of your body, that is going to govern what happens in terms of whether you lose or gain weight. So, what is a calorie? Okay, that's the basis of our discussion. Is a calorie is a measurement of heat energy. It's the amount of heat that you need to raise the temperature of 1 liter of water by 1 degree Celsius. Okay, to get technical, that's what it is just a measurement of heat. So all foods contain energy. Some are more dense with energy than others. Example, fruits and veggies contain mostly water, so they're not nearly as energy dense. We all need to take in energy, obviously, to perform all of our daily activities and stay alive. And of course, the labels on foods are going to basically show you how much energy is in that food when it comes down to it, in the form of calories. So the most important issue is the law of thermodynamics. Okay, this is something that you'll return to time and again when you're talking about whether people lose or gain weight. It comes down to the fact that energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It can only change forms. We probably all remember that from whatever it is, high school physics, but it's super important when it comes to nutrition, because you cannot, there's no free ride. The energy is going to go somewhere, right? So we're going to talk about energy intake and energy expenditure. All right. So, and the word energy, by the way, in the world of nutrition is interchangeable with the word calories, and calories is energy. Okay, so what are the components of your energy expenditure? Okay, when you're talking about energy expenditure, there's basically 4 components, okay? And really 3 components, right? Basal metabolic rate, okay? That's BMR. Now that right there is just the energy you need to stay alive for 24 hours doing absolutely nothing, okay? So hang on one second. Let me just make sure that everything is kosher. Link not working. Somebody's telling me my link isn't working. Hang on one second. Yeah, I'm not gonna be able to help him. Okay, so yeah, so let's talk about BMR, basal metabolic rate. That's just 24 hours in a dark room, lying down, breathing. Okay, that's all that is right there. Then we have exercise activity thermogenesis. Okay, that's energy you expend just during formal exercise sessions. Then we have NEAT, which is all the rest of your activity. Okay, everything that's not exercise is non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is the creation of heat. So everything you do that isn't exercise, walking, standing, chores, any movement that you do other than exercise is called NEAT. Okay, so basically sedentary people have very little NEAT, right? People who are very active and do a lot of stuff and move around a lot, their quotient of NEAT is very high. And that's going to become very important when you're talking to people about weight gain or loss, is how much NEAT is in the picture there, right? Because NEAT is most of your activity. That's the bulk of it right there. So looking at the last thing there, TDEE, total daily energy expenditure, that's the sum of everything, okay? BMR, EAT, and NEAT, all of those together are TDEE, total daily energy expenditure, okay? So how is energy stored? Obviously, it's stored in the form of fat in your body. Also, it's going to be stored in the form of glycogen. Carbohydrate is stored. Okay, so the key takeaway right here is that both fat and carbohydrate can be stored and protein cannot. So this is something important to remember. Protein cannot be stored by the body. So it must be consumed regularly. Okay, and we'll come back to that, but remember that. Okay, so with this background, how do we get fat? Well, let's talk about an acronym, CICO, calories in, calories out. That is the overarching principle, okay, that governs everything. Calories in, calories out, the law of thermodynamics. In spite of the overwhelming evidence, there are actually people who do not subscribe to that, and they will tell you, oh, calories don't matter. There's overwhelming evidence that they do. And when studies are done comparing different types of diets, it's always the calories that govern whether someone loses or gains weight. Okay. You have, for example, other quote unquote models that people will adhere to, such as the carbohydrate insulin model, which is really saying that it's just the carbs that cause you to get fat, and that when your insulin spikes, you store fat, etc. That model has been refuted very soundly, and yet you still have a lot of people out there that really adhere to that model. But in my mind, that's not valid, and it's just calories in, calories out. Okay, so we accumulate body fat when we take in more calories slash energy than is needed to meet our total daily energy expenditure. Take in more energy than you need, it gets stored as fat. That's called a calorie surplus, okay? We lose body fat when we take in fewer calories than needed, right? If we have a 2,500 daily energy expenditure and we only take in 2,000, there's a deficit there, and you're going to use body fat to make up that deficit, okay? Pretty basic stuff so far. Okay, so we got a couple of examples here. On the left side of your screen there, energy balance. The dotted orange line is showing you my total daily energy expenditure. The blue graphs, the blue bars are showing you how much I actually ate, how much energy I took in for those 30 days. And I never took in enough, did I? I never actually took in as many calories as I needed to meet that orange dotted line. That's the essence of a calorie deficit. So if we look at the numbers there, you're going to see that it's a 600 calorie deficit. I needed 3,600 calories to fuel my activities. I only took in an average of 3,000. So that's a 600 calorie deficit for 30 days. What does that result in? Take a look on the right. 7 weeks, okay, of doing that on the left, and you're going to have weight loss. So I lost about 13, 14 pounds in 7 weeks by doing what's on the left, just implementing a calorie deficit on a consistent basis, right? That's the essence of it right there, illustrated. Okay, so obviously, calories in, calories out is a very simple idea, but the actual, in practice, it's actually much more complicated, and there are many things that influence the rate at which you lose weight. Some of them are listed here: hormones, stress, individual variation, body composition. Genetics are huge. Metabolic diseases, I won't get into those, it's out of my scope, but they're real. So all of these things have a big influence on how fast or slow someone might lose weight. You can hang on to water, you can be losing weight under the hood, so to speak, and these things over here will mask that, and you will be retaining water, or you may have stress that is causing you to your metabolism to slow, right? So these things, in spite of the role they play, they do not override CICO, right? Calories in, calories out is still the overarching principle. And even if these things are in play, if you have a calorie deficit, you're still going to lose weight. It just may be slower than what you'd like. Okay, so with this being said, we're moving into the practical side. All right, how do we know what our TDEE is, total daily energy expenditure? Well, there's really no way to have a perfectly accurate formula to predict this. There is no such thing, okay? But the most convenient, easy one that I have found, and I've seen a lot of them, is just to multiply your body weight times 10 to 12. 10 if you're less active, 12 if you're more so, right? And then that's your total calories right there for weight loss. Okay. Now there's other calorie calculators online, and many of them purport to be more accurate than others, but it just doesn't matter, because once you get going, you're going to establish a baseline of weight loss, and everything's out the window. So don't waste your time trying to find the world's perfect calorie calculator. It doesn't exist, and it's not worth the time you'd spend. So I like the body weight times 10 to 12. Harris Benedict is also good, but just about any basic online calculator can do the trick. Okay, so once you know what your total daily energy expenditure is, or at least a starting point of that, you want to talk about the ratio of these macronutrients that you're going to target. All right. And so the question is, what are macros? Basically, that word is just broad categories of nutrients: carbohydrate, protein, and fat. All right. We've all heard of them. Those are macros, just broad categories. It's important to know how much energy density is in these different macronutrients. Carbohydrates and protein both have 4 calories per gram, equal amount of energy. Fat has more than double that. So that's the one you really got to watch, because it's very energy dense, and that's a sneaky one. Okay, now we're including alcohol because although it's not essential for survival, it's a player, and people tend to dismiss it. And some might argue with me whether it's essential for survival, but it has 7 calories per gram. Okay, so that's the one that you want to keep it in the back of your mind there. Okay, so that's what macros are, right? Moving on, how do you go about counting them? What should the ratio be? Let's talk about each of those. Protein, first of all. Okay, so this is the most important one, bar none. Okay, this is the one that's non-negotiable, because remember, we do not store this one, right? What's the best way to figure out how much protein you need? It's really pretty simple. Just aim for 1 gram per pound of body weight. Okay, that's going to put you in a pretty good neighborhood that you're going to have plenty of protein. Now, could you get away with less? Absolutely. You could get away with a little less. You could get away with a little more. But that's a good, easy to remember number: 1 gram per pound. Now, there is an exception to this. Let's say I have somebody who weighs 300, 350 or more, or is very, very obese and has a lot of body fat. They're not going to want to have a gram per pound of body weight. That would put them in an area that is 350, 400 grams of protein, and that's not necessary, because you're taking in protein to support lean mass and not all of the body fat. So unless you're in that category, aiming for 1 gram per pound is a solid rule of thumb. What about carbs and fat? Okay, so if you've already established that you're going to eat 1 gram per pound of protein, the rest of your calories really could be split between fat and carbs to your preference. It's not that important or crucial. If you're an athlete and you're doing high intensity workouts, you're going to probably want more carbs than fat, but it's not going to make or break you. I tend to recommend the lower fat and a little bit higher carb. Performance is going to be a little better. It's usually a better recipe. But again, you could just split those up as desired, as long as you're not have some crazy ratio of 90% fat. Okay, so that's kind of in a nutshell how you would go about counting macros. You start with that protein, and that's non-negotiable, and then you go from there and split up the rest between fat and carbs. So let's talk about protein. You want to get complete protein. Now, we could spend a whole hour just talking about protein and talking about the different qualities of protein, amino acids, and so on and so forth. But suffice it to say that if you're going to be eating only plant-based or vegan, it's definitely going to be a more challenging thing to get all the protein you need that's complete, because vegan sources are typically not complete, and you have to combine various foods to make sure you get a complete protein. So eating animal protein is definitely going to make it a lot easier to get all the complete protein that you need. But with that being said, it can be done. It's just going to take a little more diligence on your part to make sure that you're combining the foods that are going to provide complete proteins. Okay, so then fat. Let's talk about that. It is essential, right? You do want to make sure you get some minimum. You don't want to go extremely low fat, but you don't need as much as you might think. It doesn't take much for you to get enough to fuel specific body functions, hormones, manufacturing, etc. Definitely want to get your omega-3s though. Highly recommend that. Okay, let's move on. Now, let's talk about this for a second. If you have a goal either to lose or gain weight, is it like mandatory that you do this tracking thing? It's not. You can successfully lose or gain weight intuitively, but it's kind of like trying to go somewhere without a map. Sure, you can get there, but you're going to have a little bit of guesswork involved. You can do it. Yeah, some people are better at it than others. I think that it's probably a really good idea for most people at some point for some period of time, because it's going to help you get a grip on what's going on. I haven't dealt with a single person who, after tracking for some period of time, didn't say, "Oh my God, that really opened my eyes." Without an exception, everyone learns something about how much calories are in this or that. They're unaware of their intake and they become aware of it. Now, is tracking something you want to do for the rest of your life? Absolutely not. But for some short period of time, give it, maybe whether that's a few months or 6 months or off and on for some period of time. I think it's a very valuable thing to do, to learn about what's going into your body and in what are the ratios, how much protein is in certain things, how much fat is in other things. It's definitely a good learning tool. Okay, so what about various diets that obviously don't track but purport to be super effective? Keto, time restricted feeding, intermittent fasting, paleo, etc. All of these diets do work. You will lose weight, but they all work for the same reason, and that is that they induce a calorie deficit, right? If you're intermittent fasting, all you're doing is just shortening the window of time eating, so you can't eat as much. It's extremely unlikely that you're going to be able to put in as much food. Keto, you're eliminating whole food groups, right? But it is still possible with intermittent fasting and keto to overeat, and it is possible to gain weight. It's unlikely, but that's why they work, is because they are introducing a calorie deficit. Okay, so any diet that works due to the law of thermodynamics, because you're eating less than your total daily energy expenditure. Okay, and I got a little example here. Bill weighs 200 pounds. He needs 3,200 calories to maintain his current weight. He only eats 2,800. That's a deficit of 400 calories. Boom. Just like the graph I showed you earlier, that's going to result in a weight loss over time. Okay, by metabolizing stored body fat. So that brings us to a nice graph that illustrates kind of magnitudes of importance when it comes to diet, because oftentimes you hear people getting hung up on little details of this or that, minor points, right? And it's good to have a perspective of what really matters when it comes to weight loss. And at the bottom of this pyramid is absolutely the most important thing, and that's energy balance. Okay, so that governs everything. Then your macronutrient ratios play a role, getting enough protein. Then, of course, you want to have healthy foods, right? That have vitamins, minerals, electrolytes, fiber, etc. That's important stuff, but it's not crucial in terms of the fat loss, right? It's less and less crucial. And then we talk about meal timing. Meal timing is not irrelevant, but it's also not nearly as crucial as people want to make it seem. You do not have to eat on some rigid schedule where you are eating on, every 4 to 6 hours. Now, is it ideal to take in protein every 4 to 6 hours? It is. And if at all possible, that should be what you're shooting for. But again, perspective is everything. Take a look at the bottom there, energy balance. That's what's most important. Lastly, looking at the very top of the pyramid, you have supplementation. Again, I don't want to say that it's irrelevant, but it's way, way, way less important. I mean, I'll have clients that the first thing they want to talk about is supplements, and it's actually the least important thing. The most important thing is how much are you eating? Then it's what are the ratios? Are you getting enough protein? Then it's what are you eating? Okay, the quality of the foods and so on. Then it's meal timing. So let's keep that in perspective. Okay, this is basically a graph that says the same thing, and it looks a little different, okay? And basically that's what that is. Okay, so I think we're at the point where we can talk a little bit about practical takeaways. This is kind of where the rubber meets the road, if you will. So, you know, to sum up, you want to eat to a calorie deficit. Boom. That's the biggest one. Eat sufficient protein, okay? Lean tissue is important. This is a good point to bring up another topic. When you are dieting, what you want to lose is fat, right? You don't want to lose muscle. That's why we want to make sure that we get enough protein, because protein is our tissue building material. And you need to have enough of that so that you do not lose muscle. In addition to that, the most crucial thing you can do while you're dieting is lift weights at least a couple times a week. And that is because you want to send a signal to your muscles to stick around. You want to let them know that they're needed, right? They feel all lonely if they don't get told that they're needed, and they will just go away, right? So we don't want that. We want them to stick around. How do we do that? We let them know that they're needed and loved. And we do that by lifting weights. Okay. And again, that doesn't have to be an hour a day, every single day. It can be literally as little as 2 days a week. If you do a full body workout with sufficient challenge, that's going to tell your muscles, hey, I need you, man, stick around. Okay. And then if you supply the protein, that's going to help. While you're in a deficit, you don't want to make the mistake of not lifting weights, because you're risking the loss of muscle, and that's counterproductive to what you're trying to do. Okay, so then let's talk a little bit more about some important things. Eat mostly whole foods, right? Can you lose weight eating nothing but junk? Absolutely. If you ate one slice of pizza every day, would you lose weight? Absolutely. It's way underneath your total daily energy expenditure. It's not great for your health, but remember, the most important thing is not quality, it's quantity, right? So eat mostly whole foods. Now, what's the reason for that? Number one, it's for your health. Number two, it's because those are the ones that are most satiating. If I eat a cup of blueberries, that's probably about 40 calories, right? Mostly water, good nutrition, lots of bulk, makes me feel full, as opposed to if I ate, let's say, a little bitty handful of like Reese's bits or whatever they are. That would have like 150 calories. Okay, so whole foods tend to have a lot of bulk, a lot of fiber, and they're more satiating. So the advantage with that is that you're going to feel fuller. Okay, and that's a big advantage when you're dieting, because that's what you want. You don't want to be hungry all the time. So for your health and for the satiating properties that they have, eat mostly whole foods. The easiest way to do that is if you prepare stuff at home. Okay, if you go out to eat, you're always going to be at risk of not knowing what's in your food, and there's almost always going to be a lot of oils in there and way more fat than you think is in there. So eating at home is definitely a hack. It's a big hack for making sure that you can control what goes in. Okay, another issue that I run into often is, this is a very common one, by the way, which I see all the time, and that people vilify certain foods. And people love this kind of idea of good and evil. And we really need to get that out of the nutrition space, because foods are neutral. There are no evil, awful foods. There's no heroes and villains. It's just food. And it only depends on how you deal with that food. So you can eat anything you want, right? As long as you're hitting your macros, right? But this is the caveat to that. We all know that there are certain foods that when we start eating them, we can't pump the brakes, right? And those are in the category of hyper palatable foods. So we want to make sure we control our food environment. That's probably the best way to put it, is you got to control your food environment. If you have these foods around and you know they're there, you're going to eat them. So you got to know yourself, right? If you can have a bag of Reese's cups in the kitchen for months and months and not eat it, man, more power to you. I can't. So be careful with that. So again, another important thing to do if you're dieting is to weigh yourself every day. Okay. And you're going to again hear some controversy on this one. People will say, no, don't weigh yourself. It's going to get in your head and, so forth. But it's data, folks. And this is how you're going to know if you're losing weight. If you're losing weight, the scale is going to reflect that. So you don't worry about what it says on a daily basis. Okay. Weight loss is statistically noisy. It goes up and down, up and down, up and down. And those little, within a week, it's statistically irrelevant. So we want to ignore the daily ups and downs, just like we wouldn't care about what's going on in the stock market on a daily basis, right? It's what happens over time that matters. So when you weigh yourself, you're just collecting data. Take a weekly average and then log it in wherever you want to log it in. And that's how you're going to know that you're on the right track. 1 or 2 pounds a week or what have you is going to be where you want to be, right? So it's not what happens in any given day or even a 3 or 4 or even a week. It's really 1 to 2 weeks that are going to tell the tale. If I gain weight over the course of a week, I probably need to trim calories back. If I lose a couple of pounds in a week, 1 or 2, that's probably I'm on the right track. So weight loss is not linear. Okay. It's going to be a lot of ups and downs. And that's just the way it goes. So that is about all I have in terms of the presentation here. So what I'll do at this point, guys, is open you guys up